All right, guys, it is single digits in the garage gym, so I'm going to try and keep this intro relatively short and to the point. I'm interviewing somebody that really is fascinating to me, to say the least, and I just recently discovered him. Not because he's a natural athlete and he looks awesome for just turning 50. In fact, one of his recent videos is how I actually discovered him. He has a relatively small YouTube channel, but as he'll kind of get into, he really didn't get into the YouTube channel for really business promotions. It's really just to kind of share some of his years of knowledge. He has a very credentialed career as a personal trainer spanning over 30 years. He's been featured in many media outlets and definitely a busy personal trainer, to say the least. But what's very fascinating about Kevin, aside from the fact, like I said, that he's a natural athlete, he looks great for his age, you can learn a lot from just right there alone. But the main thing is his workout technique. He's doing something he calls naturally intense, which is in the realm of that high intensity training, which is also somewhat interesting to me because I said I'm kind of dabbling that a little bit. But what his workouts are doing is he's doing basically 3 workouts a week total. All these workouts are more or less at max 10 to 20 minutes. He's only working each body part 1 time a week. And he's also doing so in a very intuitive manner, meaning that every workout is completely different and random. But it's one thing if you just heard this from Kevin and it just works for him. That would be definitely a fascinating thing in and of itself. But the fact is that he's also trained thousands of clients in the exact same template and method. So I found that also extra interesting. So it sounds too good to be true, but I don't think it is. I think he's found something that definitely is worth sharing and you guys can maybe experiment with. Hopefully you guys get something out of this interview. I think you guys will, and that's why I'm really excited to share this with you. I will put timestamps down below and links to all of Kevin's websites and where you guys can find him. It's naturallyintense.net. All right, so I'm here with Kevin Richardson, who I just recently discovered on YouTube. He has a very illustrious career. I think you guys are in for a treat. And at the very least, as I'm sure he'll get into, he's going to expose you to his 30 plus years of natural bodybuilding. It's one of the reasons I wanted to have him on, because he's someone that you'll see. I actually discovered in a more recent video, which I'll pop on the screen here, about how he got to his physique, built his physique, drug-free, looks amazing. And not only that, I would say somewhat of an unconventional, it's still a bare bones foundational stuff that works, but unconventional way of training, I think most people wouldn't realize is possible, especially when they see you. So let's first get into just introducing yourself, Kevin, your bio. You got a really interesting bio in your training career. Then we'll get into your training.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. My name is Kevin, and I am a personal trainer. I work predominantly with a very diverse group of people. So I personal training here in New York, and I've been doing personal training now for 30 plus years. And it's been quite a ride. And the thing that tends to differentiate my form of training, my style of training, is the fact that the workouts last usually about like 10 minutes. It's 10 minutes 3 times a week, which is kind of how I was able to have this, much bigger of a career than I ever thought I would have had. But the idea of being able to train 3 days a week and be able to do everything from compete in natural bodybuilding competitions to lose 100 pounds to be able to run marathons, just doing that training alone has really been, a really huge success story for me in terms of personal training. But also, it's not just something I teach, it's how I train. It's how I was able to go from when I started up at 125 pounds at 6 feet tall to being able to successfully compete as a natural bodybuilder. And, back in the day, I was up there with, some of the best of them and, had my time in the sun and really, really enjoyed the whole, everything about natural bodybuilding. And I turned 50 this year and still holding on to it.
Yeah, you look awesome. Let's get
Thanks,
into yeah, I think anyone will say that when they see you. And I'm gonna put those pictures up. I will, hopefully they'll see it with you as a kid, because you got those on your website and on the YouTube channel. Those are amazing. But I still want to hit on the career, the bio a little very briefly, but because this could be a big story, but I think it's amazing how you came from Trinidad to New York. Is that correct? And just kind of how that happened.
Yeah, I started personal training accidentally. I mean, the whole training it segues from the training, in that I was a skinny kid in the gym and I was training with, some really fantastic people, but I wasn't getting the results. And back in those days, it was all about the magazines. You had all the Reader magazines and everything else. And I'd read the magazines and try and pour over everything.
And this is in Trinidad at the time.
Yeah, it's in Trinidad where I grew up. I've always been very analytical, very science-based, very, give me the number, give me the data, let me see what the evidence is. And there was so much discrepancies in terms of how people train. Some people train twice a day. Some people train for 2 hours, 6 days a week. Some train 7 days a week. Some train, 4 days a week. It was all over the place. And I started training at 14, and my dad was a bodybuilder before me. My brother was a bodybuilder. My cousin was a bodybuilder. In fact, my backyard was a bodybuilding gym, and my brother built out. So I grew up, I remember being 3, 4 years old, walking around, watching all these really huge guys lifting weights.
Competitive bodybuilding or just bodybuilding recreationally? Oh, really?
My brother was recreationally, but there were a couple of guys who went on to compete, even some who ended up turning pro, who started off literally in my backyard. Richard Louis, who was a professional bodybuilder who came from Trinidad and Tobago. And there were a couple of guys who ended up becoming Mr. Trinidad and Tobago, who literally I grew up watching them, start off.
Wow.
And so it was kind of in my blood. I was skinny, really, really skinny, painfully thin. And I started doing martial arts because, getting beaten up in school literally almost every day in elementary school. Oh yeah, it was horrible. And I just wanted to be in a place where I didn't have to deal with that. So I started off with martial arts, started doing karate. I ended up doing at some point ninjutsu, and I got really good at fighting, but I still got into a lot of problems because I didn't look like someone who could fight. I was really, really thin. And I don't know if you realize, I love comic books, and I love the comic book characters, and I wanted to look like a comic book character. And I had this idea, if I could just have that kind of a physique, I'd never have any problems, never have to fight. I'd always be okay. And I'd have a body that kind of exemplified how I felt on the inside. I felt like the body I had didn't really project the strength that I felt I had, as a person. I started training, got some results, but like I said, I got to this point where it just felt like I wasn't getting anywhere. And everything was just contradictory. There was high intensity training stuff, there was the high volume training stuff. It was kind of binary. You had Mentor on one side and you had Arnold on the other side. And the good thing about growing up in Trinidad, like we were saying before, is that people really took the time to see you, and people took the time to share their experiences. And there was this one guy, Baldwin Harris, who this old man would walk around the gym when we were training sometimes. I didn't really know who he was, but he knew he was an IFBB official, and he knew everyone. And he would actually talk to me about what they were like, and he'd say, these guys, they write the magazine articles to make money. They don't really train that way. They don't really do that. They use drugs. They use a lot of drugs. The guy who uses a lot of drugs and survives it looks better than everybody else. And then we'll say it's the training routine. And the reason why, there's all these discrepancies is because if you use drugs and don't do anything, you'll still grow. And that for me was really important to hear, to have someone in the industry really just stop and say, listen, they're all on drugs, don't listen to them. And so I stopped reading Bodybuilding magazine. I think I was like 16 years old, and I was like, I'll look at the pictures. I want to see who won Mr. Olympia. I love following the sport, but as far as information, this is not an information source. And so I did what any nerdy kid would do. I went to the libraries and read everything I could about, muscle growth. And it all came back to the whole idea that, muscles will respond if there's overload and if the intensity is high enough. And if your muscles are going to respond, it has to be some sort of stimulation it's not used to. And so I had this idea about putting together a high intensity training routine for myself that I was going to try. I was going to give it 6 to 9 months. I was going to document everything I did. I'm going to eat exactly the same, no change in diet. So it wouldn't be, okay, you change your dietary intake, and that was the reason why you had the gains. And I put together these routines, and I would give it to the instructors, because back then you had gym instructors. You didn't have trainers, personal trainers. Every gym had instructors who were all, back in those days, like Mr. Trinidad and Tobago bodybuilders, like really successful, accomplished bodybuilders. and they were always helping me out. Every step of the way, they were always there to help me out. And I would give them the routines and say, "Can you carry me through this routine?" And they'd look at the routines and say, "You want to go through this?" And I'm like, "Yes, carry me through it." Because again, intellectually, you're writing something down. You don't know exactly how it's going to turn out. And those workouts were ridiculous. I never completed them. I would get to a point where I couldn't go anymore. Very often I'd throw up. And those guys were brutal. If I threw up, they'd go to the bathroom and say, "All right, let's go back. We've got 2 more sets on this. Let's try and get 2 more sets out." And I went from training 6 days a week to 3 days a week. And I felt horrible because I thought that if I wasn't in the gym 6 days a week, I'm losing something, that, and the other. But I was going to give this method a try and see if it worked. And I started to grow. Now, the workouts were only lasting about 10, 15 minutes max. That was as long as it was lasting. And I was starting to see myself kind of get into a place where I could potentially start saying, "All right, well, maybe one day, if I keep on going like this, if it stays, I could probably be a bodybuilder." Because again, like I said, 6 feet tall, 125, everyone telling you you don't have what it takes to be a bodybuilder, you're not genetically gifted, you're not one of those guys who's tactically muscular. But this seemed to be kind of getting me somewhere. And so I stuck with it. I competed in my first bodybuilding competition at 17 in Trinidad. I came dead last. Again, I'm natural. And let's just say I'm natural. Everyone wasn't. And it was kind of an eye-opening thing to see in the teenage category that there were guys who were clearly, like really drugged out. And it was like, okay, I'm not sure if I want to do this. If this is the teenage category and these guys are on stuff, I'm not sure. I mean, some weren't, but most were. And so I kept on training. I started getting a little better. I kept on competing. I got to a point where, at least I was able to make it to the night show, make it to the top 5 in, against guys who literally I grew up watching because, bodybuilding in Trinidad as well, back then was something that everyone watched. Darren Charles was a national hero. He was the first professional bodybuilder from Trinidad. He was like an icon to all of us. And when I would compete, they would literally televise the competitions live. So
Wow.
I'm in high school and you go to school on, you have a contest on Saturday, you go to school on Monday and you walk into the school and everybody's looking at you like, "Oh my God, you were on TV. You were like," yeah, but not. And I kind of saw myself getting somewhere, but I didn't think that I was going to be Mr. Olympia. I didn't think that, and when the opportunity came, "Well, Kevin, if you do this, 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 this with your potential, the way you train so hard, you could go all the way." I grew up with bodybuilders. I saw the dysfunction. I saw the health problem. I saw the family problem. I saw the lifestyle that kind of revolved around eating, training, and not doing much of anything else. And that really wasn't something that appealed to me. So I was just gonna, do my thing and keep on going. But I didn't have any way of any form of income, and I needed, money for food because, I'm a teenager, I'm growing, and I didn't want to rely on my mom 100% for all the food I was eating. And so I asked one of my coaches that, "How can I make some extra money?" He's like, "Oh, I need to become a personal trainer." What is that? Like, "Oh yeah, I'm a trainer." And I'm like, "You're a trainer? Like, what do you mean?" He's like, "Oh yeah, clients, and I tell them what to do and I train them." And it's such a different time because here you had someone who would stop what he was doing whenever I walked to the gym, come over, check on me, make sure I was okay. We'd spend hours talking about training, back and forth, helping me so many ideas I had about how to put together things. And I had no idea that he actually charged and did that for a living. I mean, that's just kind of how things were back then. And so I said, "Okay, I'll become a trainer." Took the exam, whatever it was. And then they were like, "You pretty young, so we're going to have you apprentice, have you one person, see what you're, if you're really into this, something you really want to do, really can do. And after a year, if you're still interested, that one client, you don't mess up, you don't kill them, You can train people independently at the gym. This is not becoming part of the staff. This is literally totally independent. And so I got one client and I had her on the treadmill and she's all warming up and everything else. I had my little clipboard and I'm all ready to train her. And my coach comes over and says, what are you doing? And I said, oh, she's going to do some cardio, we'll do some weights, cool down, because I'm trying to follow, the personal training guidelines of how you train people.
Yeah.
Something I had no idea. It's the first time I was doing it. And he said something that defined my career. He said that personal training is a craft. And if you get results training a certain way, you have to train your clients the same way as well. If you train them separately from the way you train, you'll never master that particular craft because that craft is something that you do and you live and you share. And that was a nice, beautiful thing to say, but I was doing like 10-minute workout 2 times a week. This woman was paying me for personal training that's usually like an hour. How was I going to tell her, 17 years old, that you're going to train with me for 10 minutes? So I didn't say anything about 10 minutes. In fact, for years, I never used the words 10 minutes.
You're teasing a lot of people who are listening at this point are probably saying, like, what are these 10-minute workouts, which we're going to get to, because I want to get to that, because I'm sure people are for the first time hearing this, like, what is he talking about?
Yeah. And I said, we're going to do this workout. It's going to be fast, a fast workout. And she's like, okay, no problem. And she was into it. We did the workout. It was fast. She didn't question the time because it was brutal. It was really brutal. And after she was, over a couple of months, she had lost like 30 pounds, which I had never expected. And my question as well was, listen, I'm doing this for bodybuilding. She wants to lose weight. She's a middle-aged woman. How is what I do going to help her? I don't see the relevance. This is basically a bodybuilding routine designed to make me bigger, stronger, and also from a martial arts perspective, make me faster. And it was doing that, but it helped this woman lose weight. And I was totally blown away by that. And so I finished my apprenticeship period. People wanted to train with me not because of how I looked, but I didn't look as big as I was now. I was still kind of developing, but they saw my client progress. And I started training people. I've had this idea that I wanted to go in a different direction from what I was seeing all over. I wanted to really have a sense of what really. And so I took a scientific perspective. I didn't go in with the idea that 10 minutes, 3 times a week equals result. That wasn't it at all. It was working for me, but statistically, if something works for one person, that doesn't apply to general population. I wanted to see who it wouldn't work. I wanted to see who would do this type of training, the average person with average genetics, good genetics, in between, who would it really work for? And so I set out to try to disprove it, try to find someone out there who wasn't going to respond, who wasn't going to get results. And I recorded everything I could about how I ate. I recorded every single workout. I would have literally tons and tons of notebooks. I'd go home, I'd write meticulously, I'd look back at stuff. And had my first person lose 100 pounds 2 years into my training, which again blew me away. I had endurance athletes who were training 2 times a week with me, who were seeing differences in their endurance times, like cyclists who were getting better time. Again, not something I was expecting it to do. And people loved the fact that the workouts were short. One said 10 minutes. Workouts were short, but they got results. And only 3 times a week. And I came to America. When I came to America, I came to Fifth Avenue Gym. Fifth Avenue Gym was the mecca of like natural bodybuilding. In fact, when I left Trinidad and I said, I'm going to New York, where do I train? They're like, 555 Fifth Avenue, that's where you go. This is the number. Go look up the guys over there. They'll take care of you. And so I went over there and I started training there. And I started my personal training business over there. And for 17 years in this little rinky-dink gym, I was training people 3 times a week, 10-minute workouts. I would see, 20 clients sometimes a night. It was insane. It was like one person, next person, next person, next person.
How would you
And over
logistically charge that? I mean, not charging, but I guess how that was
30
just an
bucks,
hour. You'd have a bunch
30
of
bucks,
people.
30
Okay,
bucks. This is,
really? Okay,
again, I'm 20 years old.
yeah,
I'm 20 years old. There are no studies validating what I'm doing. I'm in a
yeah.
basement in a hardcore gym. I'm not, and I didn't even know what pricing was at that point in time. I just literally just came to
I could see
America.
that working though. I think you were ahead of the curve there because I think just some people coming in like, yeah, I'll pay whatever
Yeah,
you want for 10 minutes for
but I was still trying to prove it. I was still trying to find that person it didn't work for. I was still trying to see if it was something that was universal. And then I had people who started competing this way. I had competitors who were competing this way. I started competing, here in the U.S. And that was really when people started to kind of start seeing me a little bit outside of that little rinky-dink gym, Fifth Avenue gym. And, I'd compete and people would say, they do little interviews afterwards. So how much, how many hours a week do you train? And I'm like, one. And they're like, what? I'm like, yeah, if I train for like 20 minutes 2 times a week, it's like an hour. And even in the gym, Fifth Avenue Gym was like a mecca of natural bodybuilding. Bernard Seeley, who was, perhaps one of the greatest natural bodybuilders of all time, former Mr. Universe, competed in Mr. Olympia naturally, he was there. And here I am showing up and I'm working out. And as I get to the gym and start working out, I'll be walking out afterwards because it's like 10, 15 minutes. And they're like, "Wait, leaving already?" And I'm like, yeah. And when I was there for my first competition, I remember this one guy, he was so pissed off.
I was thinking that people are probably mad at you. I mean, that's the first
He
thing I'm
was
thinking.
so pissed off. He was like, "What are you doing? You have a contest coming up. You can't train. You can't train for like you just got here. You can't just leave." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm leaving." But again, you know, bodybuilding is not it's not a it's not a science based endeavor, and you don't have people who kind of look at things critically. It's kind of like a dogmatic. Like I believe in this form of training, and that's it. It's more. I call it faith based training. That's what I've seen throughout the industry. People who ordinarily in other parts of their lives can apply rational thought to if I see someone making results, getting results with a particular form of training, and I see their clients like one after the other, like a lot of clients. Like I was training more people than anybody. Every gym I've ever trained at, I've always had more people than anybody else. People would still doubt it. They still be that's not possible. You're seeing the people in front of you. You're seeing what's happening. And again, it makes sense. Muscles grow while you're resting, not while you're training. If you have 4 days off to grow, and every single time you train, you can train all out. And you're also not just about momentary muscular failure, which is one important thing that this is not based on momentary muscular failure. That's just one tool.
Yeah.
But you're always training differently. I've never done the same workout twice.
Let's get in. Let's get right into it because there's like 5 points in there that we got to get to. Well, let's start with the first thing, which is, or maybe we should summarize it first before we get into it for the person. But basically, and correct me if I'm wrong, from what I gather, from what I'm just kind of going into your videos and what you've been saying, it's 3 times a week. Each body part's only hit once a week.
Once a week, yep.
10 to 20 minute workouts, which I got to ask you later.
I train for 20 minutes.
Okay.
But nobody else does. It's
okay.
It's max 10, 15 max.
10, 15 max. Okay. And I do want to get into that logistically about, because I'm thinking about maybe give us a sample workout, something, let's say it was whatever the split was. And you got a kind of a split approach, right, in those 3 days.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Everything, it's high intensity, which we can break that down. If you've kind of watched the channel a little bit, I'm kind of dipping my toes in that back in there again a little bit. But I would say yours is a little bit different because like some people, and there's all sorts of sub avenues and camps of that. Your version of high intensity, it's not necessarily, you'll do 3 sets, not 1 set of a particular body part. Possibly, yes. I don't know if there's multiple exercises, but let's just break that. I kind of maybe as a short summary, but let's break that down again. So just what does this typical week or typical style look like that makes you...
Sure. So it's a 3-day split, and the 3-day split is, again, trial and error, trial and error, trial and error. I started working out 3 days a week, got fantastic results. Tried 4 days a week, got less results. Tried 4 days a week with lots of people, got less results. 5 days, much less results. 2 days, slightly less results. 1 day less results. So the 3-day a week split isn't something that I just kind of like took out of a hat. It's really based on a lot of people. And again, if you're training 20 people a day over 30 plus years, we're talking about hundreds, over 1,000. And even when I work at organizations, like I did a pilot program for UNICEF, and that was 432 people who we were training online. We're talking about over 1,000 people here. It's not like this doesn't work for me type of thing. This is solid trial and error. So 3 days a week is the sweet spot. That's the point where people tend to get optimal results in terms of muscle growth, also in terms of fat loss, and in terms of strength increases. Now, it's 3 days a week. Day one is usually legs. Day two is back and shoulders. Day three is chest, arms, and abdominal. Now, for some people, I'll do day one, back and shoulders, day two, chest, legs, and chest and arms on day three. So there's a break in between upper body workouts. But results-wise, it doesn't really make a difference.
Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or how do you divvy that up?
And that's another thing. Doesn't make a difference.
Okay.
Most of my clients at this point in time are extremely busy. They're business people, they're CEOs, celebrities and stuff. They don't have much time, so they try to get their workouts in when they can. So it could be different split, different days. And even me, I train, when I have a home gym at this point in time, so I train when I feel like it. But just
it's 3 days a week. So it could be 3 consecutive days in a week.
Yeah,
Monday,
it often
Monday,
is.
Tuesday, Wednesday. Okay.
It often is. For most times, it's pretty much for me 3 days straight. Just
Really? So like just 3 days in a row in that week.
And it's done.
Okay.
And it's done. I like the idea of having time when I'm just not training. And again, you're really sore afterwards. I mean, really sore. So if I train chest and arms on a Friday, I train again on, let's say Tuesday, I'm kind of stopping feeling the soreness somewhere around Monday.
So you're not necessarily waiting. Let's just say you wanted to stick to a set week, or I guess you're saying you could do either or, because you're saying like if I did chest and arms, whatever, on Friday, you could do it on Monday, but you're not necessarily waiting a full week.
No, I will always wait a full week. I'll always wait a full week between the last workout. That's important. Okay. You want to have at least 6 to 7 days in between.
Okay.
Again, results tend to become suboptimal if you go anywhere less than that. So the breakdown is at least 6 days, but 7 days is like optimal.
And let's just take the leg day for an example. So I'm trying to think of maybe I should do a different one. Maybe one has more body. Well, let's do the was it back and shoulders?
Back and shoulders?
Yeah, let's say
it's
back
funny.
and shoulders.
In Trinidad, we call it back and shoulders, even though it's shoulders and back, which doesn't make any sense whatsoever. It's just my Trinidadian.
I saw that video where you said that, yeah.
Yeah, so people in Trinidad are probably like, yeah, it makes sense. But everybody else in the world are like, what? Why do you call it back? So, but for example, I'll do one press movement. I'll do a press movement. I'll probably, if the person is starting off, do a lateral type movement, a calf movement, and then we'll do a movement for upper back, probably from a pulling movement, as a pull-up or pulling movement, or a pullover type movement, and a rowing movement, and that's it.
But I'm thinking if 10 to 20 minutes, if I did that, because you're also saying, let's get into the next thing, which is sets. Now, all those are, you said you found the sweet spot was 3 sets. The
sweet spot is 3 days. 3 sets is a sweet spot in terms of for your first exercise. You need 3 sets to kind of get into it.
Okay. Because I saw that one of your videos. That surprised me.
The problem with when I try to quantify like my workout, like how is Kevin trainer, how is Kevin trainer client? It's always different. So if, for example, I did a shoulder press and I went all out, first set was kind of warm it up, second set feel it out, third set all out.
Okay.
I did holds, I did negatives, whole 9 yards. If I'm going to do side laterals afterwards and my shoulders are feeling completely super pumped, I'm not going to do 3 again. I'm not going to go 1, 2, 3. I'm going to go straight into it. I'm going to do 2 sets. I'm going to get to a point. I'm going to train to a point where it's uncomfortable and impossible. That's the whole idea. You're training to a point where you can't go anymore. You're training to that idea of you're being completely counterintuitive. You're not thinking about how many reps I want to get. You're not thinking about how much more exercise they're going to do. You're staying completely in the moment on my side because I don't have me telling me what to do and pushing me on outside of myself. I have to do it myself. I train my training partner, and her job is at this point to make sure I don't do too much. But sometimes, I'm
Well,
turning 50 this year.
I love your intuitive approach because I want to save that before I lose my train of thought, because that's another thing I think it sets you apart from maybe other people, just other trainers in general, definitely the other high intensity people. But so, because I was trying to quantify, well, how do you get 10, 20 minutes out of that many groups possibly of exercise? But now it makes sense with only do maybe 3 sets and a couple
But I can do 3 sets for every single exercise and be done in 15 minutes.
So
Yeah.
really no minimal rest
no
period.
rest. No,
minimal rest. Okay.
None.
Okay.
None. And here's the thing about no rest. People will constantly cite these studies that find that if you have this much rest in between workouts, you get to lift more weights and you get progressively stronger. But there are no studies with 0 rest periods over years. The human body is an adaptive machine. It adapts. So people have always said, if you train too fast, you'll never get strong. I've bench pressed 405. I've squatted 595. I've deadlift 595. I just did I'm probably not going to do it again. I did a 405 stiff leg deadlift last week.
Well, it's unconventional. It's for sure sounds unconventional. I think but I don't doubt it at all the way you're doing it. I guess with the minimal sets, what pops in my head right away would be the energy systems. So the idea of like, well, if I rest a little bit longer, I have more energy, so I can go a little bit harder. That would be theoretically what I'd be thinking about.
Well, remember as well, this form of training is designed to have someone push you through. This was never designed like you have like the other systems out there that are they're kind of commercial item. This is not a commercial item. This is how I train my client. This is how I train myself. And I've never met anyone who has been able to train this way on their own for long periods of time. It's very difficult because you always default. We always look for the easy path. You're going to take some rest. You're not going to go as heavy. You have to almost be slightly insane to be able to, let's say you're doing a shoulder press, back and shoulder. I do 80-pound dumbbells and I got 10 reps on my last set. And at the last set, you said, I got 10 reps. That's too easy. So I'll hold it for like 20 seconds in the bottom position and then do 6 reps. Then I'll grab a pair of 100-pound dumbbells and try and eke out some more sets. Like, who does that?
I love it because it's naturally intuitive. I think it makes sense as far as just stimulating and punishing the muscles. But I can see people saying, well, what about, again, I want to lose this point too, because what about you also, the rep speed is different for you. Because I heard you mention sometimes you go heavy, sometimes you might do lighter, you mess with different loads, I think, I heard. But also I think the tempo it seems like you mess with. I've seen sometimes you go really fast and sometimes
I'll go really slow.
Super slow.
Yeah. There's no, like sometimes I'll do super slow, sometimes I'll do like exercise like iron crosses where you're just holding it. You're holding trying to hold insane amounts of a period of time. But there's not like a set period of time. You like a song is playing, like, all right, I'm gonna hold this until the end of the song. Why did I pick that time? Because it's impossible. Like you're always trying to figure out what's impossible. I'm training my clients. It's all about seeing the individual in front of you, understanding where they are, and taking them to that place where they are literally at capacity. You're going as hard as humanly possible. And again, my clients range from 93 years old to 12 years old. So it's a range of fitness levels. Some are natural bodybuilders, very, very few at this point in time. Most people are interested like in weight loss, but it does work for natural bodybuilding as well. If you're trying to put muscle mass on, this is a really good way. But not only are you able to get that increase in muscle mass and that look without using drugs, but you're also really physically fit. I've always been, I always tell the story of these guys who would make fun of me all the time. They'd run around. I used to live right next to Prospect Park in Brooklyn. They'd run around the park all the time. They'd say, Kevin, you don't do any cardio, because I don't do cardio. I've never done cardio. I've competed with 0 cardio. Any cardio whatsoever. The training reduces body fat enough with proper diet to put me in literally, stand on competition type shape. And it's not just something you do for competition, because it's how I walk around all the time. That's the other things about it. But they said, you can't, you could barely, run. You can do a 3 mile run, I'm sure. And I said, listen, I'm going to bet you guys money that if we run around the park's about 3 miles, I will beat you. I will put money, I put $100 out on that. And they were like, well, if you don't run, how could you know you're going to win this? I'm like, it makes sense. My muscles are stronger than yours are. I am training my cardiovascular system every single time I train. Now, the fundamental problem is that there's just this understanding that you need to train your cardiovascular system. The cardiovascular system supports the muscular system, not the other way around. If I'm training at these intensities, my heart is literally in a chest in a bicep workout. My heart's like leaping out of his chest, leaping out of my chest. You're always training to the point where your endurance level is being pushed and pushed and pushed. Someone doing cardio, steady state cardio all the time, is in the same zone all the time. They're not getting pushed higher and higher. So I'm at capacity. And my muscles are stronger and bigger. And I have a mindset to keep on going no matter what. That's why I train a lot of athletes who, what they love, especially like cyclists and marathon and triathletes, they love the mindset it creates, because you have that sense of you can't go anymore is an illusion. You can always go more. There's so much more you can do. And that pain that stops you.
And every exercise is different. Every exercise of yours is different, which I think is awesome. Some people are probably yelling at the screen right now, because as far as, meticulously tracking progress. I guess, how would you coach someone? Well, why do you do that? And then also maybe pros and cons, but how would you coach someone on that, saying like, okay, I'm going to follow your template. What exercise do I choose, or what's the best one? Not to overanalyze that particular.
It's a difficult question to answer, because there's, this is how I train people.
Right.
So if I have someone, let's say we did bench presses last week, we're going to do bench presses this week. If they did barbell curls last week, we're going to do dumbbell curls this week.
So you think it's always important to switch it up?
It's always important. I think the whole idea of progression is, again, it's that.
Or could you say both work? Could you say that maybe someone wants to stick with the same exercise and just always progress it? But do you think there is a legit value to, some people don't like that idea. Like, well, your muscles don't really know. You don't have to muscle confuse the muscle. I shouldn't say muscle confuse, but you don't have to switch exercises up. Some people think, no, you should,
Well, I think there are two things to it. Number one, people have this idea, if I don't track progression, I don't see my progress. I'm a bodybuilder. The mirror is the mirror and my photographs are the most impartial judges of whether you're making progress or not. I don't care about the measurements the way I used to when I was a kid, but when I was younger, I tracked everything, and I always saw the increases. So what I would track the increases in my muscle size. I tracked the, how much lower in body fat I could go and how much more muscle I could maintain, and I did that. That was everything. I couldn't care less how much we'd actually lifted. And that's the thing. If you don't care about how much you lift, it doesn't mean you don't get exceptionally strong. I am exceptionally strong. My clients, some of the stuff they do, exceptionally strong, but they don't track progression. They don't do progression. Not saying that progression doesn't work. And that's the other thing, in that there are a lot of different ways to get someone to have an outstanding physique and to be outstandingly strong. There's a lot of different ways. And I think too, from a science-based perspective, people don't kind of understand that there's more than one way to get there. Again, it becomes dogmatic, faith-based training. One way, and like, not really. But the other thing about not doing the same exercise over and over is that I don't have any injury. And my clients don't have injury. I don't know anyone who's been training as long as I have, who trains anywhere near as heavy as I do, who hasn't had shoulder surgery, knee surgery, elbow problems. The problems I have been from impacts, not training overuse injuries. I don't have any overuse injuries, which is, knock on wood, I turned 50 years old this year, but that's extremely important. And I don't think it's a question people look into. They don't think about that. I used to bench press every single time I trained. This is one reason why I vary everything, because it was impressed upon me as a teenager that you had to have an impressive bench press. and I got as high as 405 pounds. And one day when I was warming up, I was warming up at 135, just going through the reps. I heard a snap, like someone tore something. Like, what's that sound? And all of a sudden, the bar just dropped on one side, and
Oof.
a bit of a former rotator cuff, rotator cuff tear. Nothing too serious. It sounded a lot worse than it was. It was recover from it, but when I was going through rehab and everything with it, the exercise therapist said, if you do the same exercise over and over, you're gonna get an overuse injury. And he talked about something like quick twist bees, like, think about, the Industrial Revolution when they started putting people on assembly lines and having them doing the same motion over and over.
Yeah.
That's when they started seeing overuse injury. Training is the same way. And that to me was like, yeah. Plus, I also intellectually knew at that point that it made more sense to vary my workouts, but there were some exercises I would do every single time because I wanted to have that big squat. I wanted to have that big bench, big deadlift. And from that point on, 18, like never again, no more. Not doing this, not doing this, marrying myself to one exercise. And with my clients, having had clients who've been with me for 10, 15 years, injury rates are really low. And if you think about, people always talk about high intensity training, you must get injured a lot. Like, no, you don't, because you're using weights you can handle. The weights I use are extremely heavy because I've been doing it for a long time, and you get progressively stronger. But I don't have to use the weight that I do. That's why I have a training partner sometimes to kind of say, Kevin, maybe you don't put 350 and we do some jumps. Maybe 315 jumps right now, not a good idea. And the fact that I have my training partner as well, one of my training staff, Erica, if I'm doing something, she has to do it too. So sometimes I'll be doing something on my own and I won't think about it. But if I'm training with her, like, yeah, it's kind of stupid. This is a little bit too much. Just tune it down a little bit.
Let's get into, because this is probably a related point, but the recovery time. So that long week, at least you said, between if I train on Monday, say legs, don't hit it again until Monday. Nope. What if, going back to maybe your intuitive approach, let's say you trained on Monday, again, really, really intense, but let's say maybe someone has fast recovery or just like, I really could go on Friday.
Never seen it.
Saying
Never
no,
seen it.
just stay till Monday.
The ones who did it had less result. Again, the beautiful thing about bodybuilders is that a lot of them don't listen to anybody. They don't listen to anybody. And for me, as someone who is, a keen observer and who has a real desire to try and understand what if, they give me all this data. Like, I have people who I would train 2 days a week, and then they would say, no, I have to do an extra day. Okay, right. So I got those trained 2 days a week, and I have those trained 4 days a week. They're all getting ready for competitions. I can see who looks a little better than the other, and they're all eating relatively the same within my particular way of eating. They're eating pretty much the same way, more or less. And the results are always different.
Okay.
And that's what matters the most. And that's where, whenever someone starts arguing, like, your form of training is like, this is not an argument. This is not something that you argue about. This is, you test and you see what works. You test and you see what works. It's all about testing and seeing what works. There's no reason to argue anything. I remember too, when I came to the United States, I thought when I came here with this 10-minute workout 3 times a week, everyone would be up in arms and saying, wow, that's fantastic. Let me try it out. I want to learn more about it, because I had this, again, science-based idea that people would be interested in testing it, because I thought if more people did it, it would allow me to have even more data coming in and start fine-tuning it even more. That didn't happen. Everybody was like, no, I train this way. That doesn't work. That's impossible. But at the same time, truth exists outside of it. And a lot of people talk about Mike Mentzer and Arthur Jones, high-intensity training. Truth is, if anybody took the same steps I did and went to a library, same way Arthur Jones probably did, and looked up how you train and everything else, you'd come to basically the same conclusions. And there are natural bodybuilders out there who do train very similarly to the way I train. I think it's just a matter of how many people out there really say, okay, I'm going to keep my diet exactly the same. I'm going to train this particular way and see what works. someone who I knew Mike Mentor personally, and he was like, "This is," and in general, those guys in the magazines, what they write and what they actually do. And there was also too, a very big letdown with the fact that back in the '80s when I started training, in the early '90s, people didn't talk about steroid use, and so if someone's telling me that you're training however how you're training and you get all these fantastic results and you use Joe Eater's this powder or you use whatever other supplement that and the other and you omit the fact that you're using more drugs than you know
Yeah.
most pharmacists have probably ever seen in their career. Those are not trustworthy sources of information, and that's something I try to get across as well. You have to be honest. You have to be really honest. All the guys who I knew growing up who were on drugs would say they're on drugs. They would never tell some kid growing up that you could look like me if you didn't use drugs. And that's the thing, is that I've actually seen people using drugs who didn't work out. Like this one guy, he started using drugs. Work schedule was way too hot, was way too hectic. Wasn't able to get to the gym. I saw him 2 months later. He's like, "Man, I didn't get to go to the gym." And I'm looking at him. He's huge. He's much bigger than he was before. I'm like, "What the hell? Jesus Christ!" So whenever someone says something like, "Oh well, it's not all the drugs," like, no, it is. It is. If you have a controlled experiment, you have to have everyone with the same parameters. And even when you have all those studies with 12 people is not enough to tell anything. 12 for 6 weeks, and I understand. Studies cost a lot of money, and people take the studies as entertainment. Magazines have been doing it for decades, and they sensationalize it. But a study is something you start with. And so what I can say is, in terms of the bodybuilders who are out there, I just couldn't take them seriously. I really couldn't, because as a kid, realizing that this person is lying to me in the magazines and saying it's genetics, it's what I eat, no, I couldn't. So I was very much like, no, I don't want to.
You hit on this too on your channel with, I think everybody knows this, but this is one of the reasons why when the feed, you attract me right away when I started a video, because again, great shape, very unique training style, which I think is, people are going to love this interview. I love it already. But the also think that you're natural and you promote the idea, like even on social media, it's the same thing, but now on a bigger scale, because everyone can be kind of lying about the results because maybe I'm not technically on stuff. I'm naturally enhancing myself with TRT, quote unquote. So I'd love to hear you talk about that, but also I loved your no nonsense diet, especially the you had a video talking about, which I think is kind of true. I mean, I like protein. I think protein's important. I don't think you need heaps and heaps of it to reap these benefits, especially doing something with yours, which is still high intensity. So I think you do a lot of credence in that. So any kind of thoughts on natural, living a healthy lifestyle, those lifestyle factors, consistency, diet?
The natural point, people often will say things like, Kevin, you took the moral high ground by not using drugs. It wasn't a moral high ground. It wasn't a moral high ground at all. I wanted to be in a place where I looked like a superhero. I wanted to be in a place where I could step on a bodybuilding competition stage and feel like I belong there. I wanted to be in a place where I could be big enough where no one would mess with me. I got all of that. Do I need to be big enough to win a Mr. Olympia title? No. Do I want to have the side effects that I saw everybody else growing up go through? The social side effects, the physical side effects, the lifestyle that they were living. There was nothing glamorous about that to me. The idea of my life revolving around training, eating, and drugs was not something that appealed to me in any shape or form whatsoever. And I saw the side effects, right in front of me all the time. So it's kind of like, when people say, how come you didn't use drugs? It's kind of like if you grew up around, crack addict, watching them suffer, watching them go through, real misery. And then one day someone saying, "Hey, you ready for this?" Like, no, I'm good. And that's the problem. But the problem is that they try to create this alternative lifestyle, like it's this great, fantastic thing. But in public, they say that when you meet these guys, that's not what they're saying at all. It's not easy walking up a flight of stairs and being out of breath. Like, that's not something that they talk about. They don't talk about, all the other issues that they have to deal with, the sacrifices. And you don't need it. I mean, if you want to be, if you want to be a competitive bodybuilder in a non-drug tested organization, you're compromising a lot for a $15 trophy. Turning pro is one thing, but not everybody turns pro, and a lot of people have died. A lot of people die all the time, and not just die, but have lifelong side effects from using drugs. And as far as TRT is concerned, I have an 18-year-old, and he's training with me 3 times a week. He's blowing up, right? He's going through that phase. If I had the testosterone levels of him, I'm still natural, right? Because it's within human parameters. But if a man who's about to turn 50 has the testosterone all the time, no ups and downs, all the time, every single week, of an 18-year-old, that's not natural. And if you start competing and you start dropping your calories, testosterone levels drop. Back the reason why people started using steroids, because they realized when you start cutting down for a competition, the testosterone levels plummet. You lose a lot of muscle mass. Most natural bodybuilders tend to lose a lot of muscle as they cut down. I don't, because I stay cut all year round, and I try to keep my testosterone levels, I guess, at a normal pace, because there's no extreme dieting in my particular system. It's always, this is how you eat. It'll be harsh to get there. Once you get there, your body's going to be stabilizing. You get there nice and slowly, and your body's in a place where you're not killing yourself. You're not doing something that's temporary. The look is something that you want to walk around with all the time. But steroids make a big difference in that. That's why those guys can do tons of cardio, get lean, get shredded, but maintain all that muscle mass, because the testosterone levels are naturally high, even though they're cutting down the calories. Human beings can't restrict calories to a large degree and maintain testosterone levels. But if you're on TRT, you can. Is that natural? Absolutely not. And if you're on drugs for years on years, your muscles are going to experience hyperplasia. You're going to have bigger muscles than you would have had if you never used drugs to begin with. So you're not natural. Like, sorry, I mean, you did something years ago, whatever. Are you natural? No, you're not. Is it a bad thing? No. That's the other thing. There's no moral judgment from someone like me as far as people who use drugs or who don't use drugs. There's a camp of people like, oh, the natural guys are the good guys and the drug guys are the bad guys. Some of my best friends, some of my really, really good friends, they use steroids. It's a choice that they make. It's just a choice that, for me, is not something that's interesting for me. I don't even find it interesting. It's just not an option in there. And I think that bringing any side down is not really helpful. You're not understanding where they come from. And there's so many young people, which is why I have my channel, why I try to be out there, who have a coach who comes to them and says, hey, listen, kid, if you want to get big and strong and muscular, you have to do this. So many women out there whose coaches will come to them and say, get into a bikini competition, you need this, 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 this. They don't know what they're getting into. So many athletes out there whose coaches come and tell them you have to use this. They don't know what they're getting into. And then you have all these movie stars who go on television with the talk shows, promoting the movies, talking about, oh yeah, I ate chicken breast and protein powder and trained every day. That's how I put on 30 pounds of muscle and got, sub 10% body fat. Of course not. They're lying. You know what they're doing. But you're seeing someone in a position of, fame, in a place where you probably want to be, with a look you want to have. And so drug use is becoming more and more acceptable. Drug used to be something where, it was the guys who competed who would pretty much use drugs. It wasn't as much just recreational trainers. Now it's a lot more recreational people using drugs. And again, with social media, you use drugs. So now you can have people following you on social media. Whenever someone attains any degree of accomplishment in terms of their physique, the first thing people will say is, oh, you must be on drugs. Even with me, people will tell me all the time, like,
yeah,
you must have been using drugs. You must be on TRT. And I'm like, if I was on drugs, I want my money back. Because I don't know about you. I grew up watching guys use the drugs. They don't look like me. They don't look anything like me.
How about let's get into just your basic diet recommendations. I like your stance on Yeah, protein. I mean, I take supplements. I'm not gonna be a hypocrite in that, but I don't think they're totally, I don't think they're necessary. But just your take on that.
Again, it's about, you know, it's about weighing the evidence. And for me, I had a period of time, growing up in Trinidad, where I made my most gains, where I was eating about 120, 125 grams of protein average per day, per year. Like that was all I was eating. And I got bigger, I got stronger, I put on the size, I was able to compete. And that was at no point towards the higher end of those, me getting bigger, was I at 1 gram protein per pound of body weight. But I always felt like I was missing out. So I'd come to New York on vacation. I was actually born in Brooklyn. Born in Brooklyn, grew up in Trinidad. But come here on vacation and I try to get protein powder. So for that week, those 2 weeks, I'd have protein powder, expecting like, all right, something's gonna happen, something's gonna happen. Like I'd go back, nothing happened, but I was only 2 weeks. When I came to live here permanently at 20 years old, I had protein powder at my disposal. I could finally get a chance to see what all the fuss was about. And I was so looking forward to this massive increase in muscle mass, and it didn't happen. It didn't happen. And then when I stopped, when I was getting ready for my first competition, Ian Mercer, who was my bodybuilding coach and like a grandfather to me pretty much, he said, before a competition, 3 months before a show, no protein shakes. What? No protein shakes? Like, yeah, we don't do protein shakes. Natural bodybuilders, the look cut, we don't do protein shakes. The milkshake, you don't use that. Okay. And so I cut the protein shakes out, haven't used them for 4 years. Because I had 4 years where I wasn't competing or doing anything. I was just retired because I wasn't competing anymore. I wasn't going to use drugs. So I didn't know natural bodybuilding existed. So I was kind of in a limbo. But here I was doing a natural bodybuilding competition, getting ready for something. I stopped using the protein shakes, replaced all the protein shakes, solid protein, and I started making progress even though I was cutting down, which to me was and again, looking at the notes, comparing and contrasting, more protein equal more results. No, didn't really work for me. And then I had over time, because I had people who are training, who were getting for competitions and who were just training in general, I'd recommend protein shakes with the fact that I was taking protein shakes. When I had them stop taking protein shakes and replace the protein they were taking with solid food, they all had significant increases as a result, and they also had a little bit of fat loss.
So do you promote just a kind of just a general balanced diet, or is there a summary of how could you elevate or pitch diet?
High fiber, zero processed foods.
Okay.
Zero processed foods. So nothing at all is processed. So chicken, fish, beans, oat bran cereal is a huge component for me for breakfast. Things like sweet potatoes, Japanese sweet potatoes, we call ground provisions back home, things like that. Fat levels, moderate. Protein levels, moderate. Carbs as needed. So on days you're training, carbs go up. Days not training, carbs go down. Days not training, protein goes up, carbs go down. That balance. That seems to be pretty much what works universally in terms of trying to put on muscle mass while at the same time maintaining a good body fat level.
I like that. And just we'll kind of wrap it up a little bit here with maybe just a general we'll wrap up the training kind of recommendations for people, and just playing a little devil's advocate, because I can see someone listening to this, and if you didn't have all your huge history of training with people, obviously your experiments,
yeah,
I think most people would hear this. Okay, well, it's genetics, or he's an outlier that might work for him. I'm sure you get people accusing you of you got to be lying, you got to be more than 10 minutes. But I think everyone listening, I think, believes you and sincere. Next thing is, how would you encourage someone to start? And maybe I can say myself, for instance, because as you're hearing this stuff, back in my head's I would have to do more than one time a week. At the very least, I'd be itching it. I know. You
know what? I would say yeah. You're going through the same thing I did. Yeah. Whenever someone comes to me and they're skeptical, I say it's a good thing. Skepticism is important. Skepticism is how you probably got to where you are today. It's important to be skeptical. And so test it. When I started training, going from 6 days to 3 days, it felt like I had like insects in the back of my head scratching to get out. Like, no, you gotta go back to the gym. You gotta go back to the gym. You gotta go back to the gym. But my muscles were like, even if you wanted to, bro, you couldn't. And that's the thing too, in that the intensity is so high. If you've never experienced it, it's very difficult to put it into words. Which is why I would say, before you train with me, everybody has a trial workout so you can see what it feels like. So you can also know what you're getting into. When I first started training clients, my clients would throw up all the time. Until one day, one of my coaches pulled me aside and said, Kevin, you might want to test and see if they have the same results if they don't throw up. And I was literally like, wow, that's actually a good question. And I didn't. You don't have to throw up in order to get to that point. But for me, sometimes I still do. For me, I come from a place where like Tom Platz came to Trinidad at one point in time to do a seminar, and he did legs in front of us. He trained legs, and we just watched in awe. And I thought I was training so hard, and seeing what that man did to himself. And he had been retired for a good number of years, and he's doing 315 squats for time, like 3 to 5 minute squats. No competition's coming up. That's just what he was doing because he loved what he was doing. And I think that there is something within us that tells us that we are training at the hardest level possible. Not.
For me, sometimes I find it hard where I can make I cannot do another rep. It burns. It really hurts. I have to not record myself because I'm screaming and my face is good. But then it's relatively short. It's relatively brief. And some people I know at high intensity, well, it's got to be longer, super slow. That's not hard. Some people. So I think around here, it can be shorter or faster, shorter or longer. But there's that point where it's like, well, I don't know. I mean, I can't do anymore. My muscles feel like they're done. But let's just say I wait 2 or 3 days. I'm still sore. I can't do anything. Fifth or sixth day, I could be like, well, I could go again. But you're still saying, I guess, 2 parts to that question. How do I really know? Because I feel like I can kind of get there. I can't do anything more. So is that enough of a sign? Or is there other things you'd recommend to do? Or part of that, let's say I'm recovered. I shouldn't say recover. I'm in the recovery process 2 or 3 days later. Like I did legs the other day. They're going to be sore like this for a while, for a few days. But I'd say on the 5th day, they would feel pretty fresh, I would assume. But you'd say it's always good just to recommend a week is a good cutoff.
And again, if I was starting off my career and you'd ask me this question, I would say, well, if you feel recovered, you probably could go ahead and train, because I wouldn't have had the dozens of people who did that and didn't get the same results as the ones who trained less. And again, here's the thing that people need to understand and take really seriously. I'm a personal trainer. I get paid when someone trains with me. If I tell them you're only training 3 times a week, not 4 times or 5 times, I'm only getting paid for those 3 sessions. Right. I've actually had business partners who wanted to go into business with me, and they wanted to take Naturally Intense and make it something bigger. And they were like, Kevin, what if we just put 1 more day in there? But I've seen people will get less results. And I'm uncompromising with my clients. My clients are people who put their trust in me. My clients are people who put their faith in me. And it's important to understand the responsibility that you have when you've got to a certain point. And I'm there now. So that kid who I was reading the magazines, all the nonsense, that the other, it's my responsibility to be in a place where if that kid looked online and read something that I said or saw something a video that I did, that they get truthful information based on not what's profitable to me, but what works. And that's what I've seen. And it's whenever someone says, oh, it got to be more, like, listen, I would make so much more money if I had 4 days a week, 5 days a week. But it does not work. And again, if you're training on your own, it's very difficult to understand how far you can really go. I think everyone out there, I started off not being able to do this. I just on my own after, really being trained to do so, but also coming from a background in ninjutsu where it's all about everything you do is trying to be in the most uncomfortable place possible and keep on going. there's so much mindset involved in being able to get to that next level in terms of your training that most people scratch it. You know, you go to a gym, especially, I mean, I hate to say it, but you go to a gym, an entire gym, there's probably not even one person who's really every single time, like really pushing it. But
Well,
you
it's hard
have
to
those,
because you're going to be screaming, making noise. And I feel like sometimes I have to, stuff comes out of me.
yeah,
Yeah.
I can't train Planet Fitness. They kick me out. There's no way. That's why
I
I train at
got I got to
home
ask this too because I'll be mad if I didn't. But you train at home, so
completely,
any
100%.
any general tips for people? 'Cause I've been watching my channel, I have home fitness stuff. Is there
Mhm.
any essential equipment or stuff you'd recommend, or just any tips about?
Dumbbells,
Okay,
dumbbells, new bells. I live by those things. That's
yeah,
up dumbbells. Get some dumbbells and build on that. You don't have to have all the equipment. When COVID happened, I had let's see, I had a barbell, dumbbells, and a bench, and I had that for a year. And I thought that my physique was going to whittle away, like I wasn't going to get the same results. No, I actually made progress, and I was kind of scratching my head because I'm all about testing and testing and testing and trying to find what the minimum dose is. So the minimum dose in training, I know what that is. But the minimum dose as far as equipment is concerned is also a lot less than we think.
yeah,
You can have all the equipment in the world, but if you're not training to that point, if you're not getting enough rest, if you're getting enough sleep, if your nutrition is not on, if you're not also things like alcohol, that and the other, like if you want to really put your best on in terms of muscle mass, you can't have alcohol in your system. You can't. And you can't have unprocessed foods. Like you really have to live a near monastic type of
I'm
lifestyle.
already down 2 notches in your book already. But yeah,
It's
uh,
hard. It's
yeah,
really hard, which is why when someone looks the way they look, people say, "Oh, he must be on steroids," because who does that? Who's going to eat that way, train that way, and then do it for the years it takes? So people talk about me being a genetic freak. I'm a freak because I have small joints. So when I put the muscle mass on, it looks a certain way. That's genetics. But it took 11 years.
yeah,
If someone starts training and they spend, let's say, out of those 11 years, let's say 8 of those years, people telling them, maybe this is not for you. Kevin, maybe this is not for you. Yeah, you're getting big, but bodybuilding, everything's not really together. No one's going to tell them that a genetic freak if that person finally does keep on going and
right,
years later it gets to that point. There's always that item, this missing, this missing, this missing. And what this missing does, it takes the responsibility away from you, the individual. What I try to be is a voice saying, you can do this. All I am, I'm a Roger Bannister. I'm the guy who did the 4 minute mile, broke the 4 minute mile, so you can do it too. It's not that I'm special or anything else. It's that you can do a lot more than you think you can. And that's even with the training, like you always have to keep on thinking you can do a lot more than you think you can. And being able to see, I mean, I met Dorian Yates one time, and it was one of those NPC shows. It was in between. He was talking a little bit, and he was really, really on in terms of how much he knew, not just about bodybuilding, but we kind of had that thing about being in that place that no one wants to go to. Like everyone's like, no, I don't want to go to that place. Like that's what separates you. If you can find a way to get to that place, it makes a difference in the way you look. And it's not easy. It usually requires someone outside of you to kind of safely take you through there. But if you're training at that type of intensity, you don't need as much, and you're gonna really have a physique that's gonna look different from everyone else's. But again, even though it works over time, we're talking 5 years, 10 years. No one wants to hear that. People want to hear instant, instant, instant. I tried that workout, it didn't work. How long you tried it for? 3 months. I tried that, it didn't work. How long you tried it for? 2 weeks. I tried it, didn't work out. How long did it work for? A month. Like natural bodybuilding, there are people out there who, before they even lifted weights, were muscular, and those most successful natural bodybuilders, that's those guys. Those girls who, without even lifting a weight, you call them back and standpipe people. They just look fantastic. Like I would watch them growing up and be like, man, why couldn't my parents be? Which is why when someone says like Kevin, you're a genetic freak, it hurts because I'm like, I saw those freaks. But the thing is,
you said something
those
about
guys,
expressing your genetics too. You said something I agree with, which was I think it was one of your videos where people think they know the genetics, but it might be there. You just haven't given it time to express the
No,
genetics. Let it,
you
let it
haven't.
come in. Yeah.
Kai Green used to train Fifth Avenue Gym, and we were like this, and we would spend hours talking about the fact that anyone who you could just take, if you could have them do everything you told them to do, everything, train exactly the way you told them to train, eat exactly, no wavering whatsoever, you would be able to win at least a regional title in natural bodybuilding, at least regional. You may never end up being a top pro, but could you turn pro? Absolutely. Absolutely. I think more people than you think would do that. But are they going to do it for 5 years? Probably not. 10 years? Probably not. When someone does do that, I always say this: if you train hard enough, eat smart enough, follow that lifestyle, go 100%. And there's a big difference between 80% and 100%, especially as you get older. Especially as you get older. It's a big difference. You can achieve a lot more than you think you can achieve. But the problem again is that you have those who were naturally gifted to begin with. They go to the gym, they get mediocre results, but they look fantastic to begin with. So those mediocre results push them into that place where they look exceptional. And you look at how they train without looking at what they look like before they started training. It's not about where someone is, where did they come from, drug-free. If someone was drug-free and skinny and got bigger, that's the person that I would look at. When I was training in the gym, all those guys walking around huge, I couldn't care less. If ever just one guy used to work in the docks, I saw his bench press steadily going up over time. He wasn't a big guy. He wasn't spectacular looking. No one thought about him. I learned a lot from him because I went over and said, "What are you doing? How are you training?" Well, I make sure I different exercises all the time. I vary things as much as I can. He only trained bench press once a month, and things in my mind were kind of like, But you would never, on
Right.
social media, if he was posting his workouts, you would never look at him. You'd never think about him because he's not impressive. We look at that with impressive, and that's a problem. Impressive doesn't equal what's going to work for the average person. What I talk about here is for the average man or woman, or those genetically gifted as well. Everyone will have some kind of benefit from it. That's what's important. And
Awesome.
in terms of is it possible to look fantastic without using drugs or TRT? As a teenager, adult, getting older in life. I grew up around. Kenny Hall was a huge influence for me as well. He competed up to his late 60s. He looked not at it from height in his late 60s, and I saw him, and I was like, "That's what I want. I want
Yeah.
that. I don't want drugs. I want that." And I think people, if they saw that the way I did, and sat where I sit right now, with all the data, also being able to see all those people who have trained over the years and trained, and the remarkable improvements that they made. Seeing that always gives me hope that you can really do a lot more than you think, like
Yeah.
a lot more than you think, and that keeps me going as well.
Yeah, I think you just motivated a lot of people, and you got a lot of people's brains spinning like crazy right now. So with all this being said, I just want to really plug everything that you do, where everybody can find you, and just products or things so we can learn more about you and your system.
Yeah, official website is naturallyintense.net. You can see my YouTube channel. Look up Kevin Richardson, Naturally Intense, and I've always doing my best to try to share what I've learned over all these years. The 30 years of training, I've learned so much. I have all this data swimming around my head, and if I died tomorrow, it would be a shame because people wouldn't have a chance to learn what I learned. So I'm trying to get that out because to whom much is given, much is expected.
Awesome. I mean, I learned a lot. I was just quiet this whole time because I was just soaking in all this knowledge. So hopefully, I know everyone's going to love this one. So hopefully, I'll be applying your stuff in future videos, and I'll be testing this stuff out. Definitely, I'll keep you posted on that. And definitely everybody else, if you're posting anything else, let us know in the comment section. Thank you so much, Kevin.
Thanks a lot, Mike, and everybody out there. All the best in Excelsior.